When you think about fueling up a car, you probably picture the exact same setup your grandparents pictured,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The classic gas
Yeah,
station.
exactly. You pull up to this static location where the infrastructure is, literally cemented into the earth.
Right, with the giant underground tanks and those massive concrete canopies.
Right. And as we've, started transitioning to electric vehicles, we've essentially we've copy pasted that exact same rigid blueprint.
We really have.
We dig deep trenches into parking lots. We lay miles of heavy copper wire, upgrade these massive grid transformers, and we cement these EV chargers right into the pavement.
Just locking them in place forever.
Exactly. But we are looking at a stack of materials today for our deep dive that suggests this entire paradigm is about to be completely shattered.
It really is a complete conceptual shift
Yeah.
because for a long time, the industry just assumed that the only way to charge a vehicle was to tie it permanently to the local power grid.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing now is a move toward a future where the charging station is, well, it's no longer a destination you have to navigate to.
Yeah.
Instead, it's becoming this flexible, mobile resource that can adapt and scale exactly where and when it's needed.
And to understand how this is happening, we are pulling from a really diverse stack of sources today.
We really are.
We've got these industry press releases detailing these massive 1,000-pound mobile batteries. We're looking at technical analyses on the open source software networks that actually allow these batteries to communicate.
Yeah, the software side is fascinating.
It is. And maybe most interestingly, we have a cutting-edge academic paper that simulates how all of this untethered hardware could quite literally save lives during a mass hurricane evacuation.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right.
But the overarching theme connecting all these sources for you listening is this fundamental untethering of our transportation energy from the static electrical grid.
Mm.
We aren't just looking at, incremental improvements to battery chemistry here. We're looking at a completely different logistical approach to how energy is distributed.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how EV charging is transforming from this static, expensive bottleneck into a dynamic and, highly intelligent network.
Right.
And to appreciate the solution, we really need to look at the sheer friction of the current system.
Mm.
Right now, traditional grid-tied chargers are just painfully slow to deploy, and they require a staggering amount of upfront capital.
They do. And the numbers are a huge barrier for businesses. To
Yeah.
give you a practical example of this friction, look at the mandate Ford recently gave its dealerships.
Oh, yeah, the dealership requirements.
Yeah, if a dealership wants to be certified to sell electric vehicles moving forward, Ford requires them to install 2 DC fast chargers and a level 2 station right on their lot.
Okay, sounds reasonable on paper.
Right, but the estimated cost for a business to actually do that is around $900,000.
Wait, 900,000?
Nearly $1 million, yes.
That is just a massive amount of capital to tie up in a parking lot just for the privilege of selling the cars.
Right.
And what exactly is driving that cost so high? It's not just the physical plastic and metal of the charger itself, right?
No, not at all. The cost is largely in the unseen infrastructure. You can't just, plug a commercial fast charger into a standard electrical panel.
Yeah, it's not a toaster.
Exactly. It requires serious utility upgrades. You're paying for engineering studies, municipal permitting, you're out there digging up concrete, laying heavy conduit, and often installing entirely new transformers.
Wow.
And the money is only half the problem. The other half is the time. Right now, utility companies are quoting lead times of up to 18 months just to get the grid upgrades finished for these stations.
Wait, 18 months. So you have a business owner looking at an 18-month wait, plus nearly $1 million in capital expense before they even know if their specific location gets enough traffic to justify the chargers.
Exactly. It is a massive risk.
But this is exactly where a company called Spark Charge is stepping in, right? And they're completely bypassing this grid bottleneck.
They are.
They recently introduced a piece of hardware called the Roadie V3. Now, their older model, the V2, was essentially this 200-pound battery pack that a tow truck driver might use to give a stranded EV a quick burst of range on the side of the highway.
Right, like an emergency jerry can for an EV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the Roadie V3 is a completely different beast. This new battery unit weighs 1,600 pounds.
It is a massive piece of equipment, but that size gives it the capability to literally replace a permanent grid connection.
Wow.
That 1,600-pound unit houses a 75 kilowatt-hour battery with about 56 to 58 kilowatt-hours of usable, deployable energy.
And just to put that in perspective for you listening, a typical home EV charger pushes out maybe 7 to 11 kilowatts of power.
Yeah, they're pretty slow.
Right. But this spark charge unit, it can push power out at 90 kilowatts, and they say it's upgradable to 125 kilowatts.
Which fundamentally changes its utility. I mean, pushing 90 to 125 kilowatts means this off-grid battery can completely discharge its stored energy directly into a vehicle in about 45 minutes.
That's crazy.
You're getting commercial-grade fast charging speeds from a box that isn't plugged into anything.
And they're using this technology to create what they call the Roadie V3 hybrid. It basically acts as a semi-permanent fast charging station.
Right.
Because it doesn't need to be hooked up to the utility grid. There's zero trenching. You aren't ripping up asphalt or waiting on the city for permits. They can drop this unit onto a site and have it fully operational in under 48 hours.
That speed is just incredible.
Yeah, and the cost is less than $100,000.
Yeah.
Which is a fraction of that Ford dealership mandate we talked about.
And when you look at the implications for fleet operators or, say, logistics companies, think about a FedEx or a UPS, this completely changes their risk calculus.
Oh, totally.
If you want to trial an electric delivery fleet at a new warehouse, you don't have to commit to a permanent multi-million-dollar infrastructure project. You can scale up your charging capacity instantly by just dropping these units in the lot.
And if you move locations, you just put them on a truck and take them with you.
Exactly.
And it isn't just massive battery blocks making this happen. We're also seeing off-grid solar chargers proving this concept.
Yeah.
Up in Greater Boston, there's this fascinating pilot program using something called the EVARC, which is made by a company called Beam Global.
Yeah, the EVARC is really cool.
They partnered with Zipcar to bring EV car sharing to communities that traditionally don't have the electrical infrastructure to support it.
Right, because the EVARC is entirely self-contained. It requires zero construction. It basically looks like a heavy parking pad with a solar canopy above it.
Just sitting right in the parking spot.
Exactly. It fits right into a standard space, generates its own solar electricity, and stores it in an onboard battery. It can generate up to 265 miles of driving range per day, and it can charge 2 cars simultaneously.
Which seems like a perfect synergistic match for a car-sharing model like Zipcar.
It is, because it aligns perfectly with the actual usage data. I mean, the median trip for a Zipcar in Boston is just 25.5 miles.
Oh, really? That's short.
Yeah. And on top of that, data from the U.S. Department of Transportation shows that household vehicles, on average, sit parked about 95% of the time.
Wow, 95%.
So you have these cars sitting idle in a parking lot for long stretches between relatively short trips. That is the exact perfect scenario for a solar canopy to slowly replenish its internal batteries and then dump that power into the cars when they're parked.
According to the sources, the state of Massachusetts is relying on flexible deployments like this to help push toward a mandate of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Transportation accounts for roughly 38% of their emissions, so they need solutions that can be deployed quickly. And just be clear for you listening, we are strictly reporting on the policies driving these market shifts as they're outlined in the source materials.
Yeah.
We aren't taking a political stance on the mandates themselves, just looking at how they're forcing the technology to adapt.
Right, exactly. The policy is just creating an urgent demand for infrastructure that avoids that 18-month utility backlog.
Yeah. To put a visual on all this hardware, think about it like computing. Building a traditional grid-tied charger is a lot like building a custom desktop PC permanently into the wall of your house.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, because if you ever want to upgrade it or move it to the garage, you literally have to tear down the drywall. But Spark Charge and Beam, they're functioning like high-powered laptops or massive portable power banks. You just take them exactly where the work is. But that does raise a very practical question for me. If these 1,600-pound Spark Charge batteries are entirely off-grid, how do the batteries themselves stay charged?
Oh.
Like, are we just driving diesel flatbeds around the city to pick up dead batteries and drop off full ones?
That is the most important logistical hurdle, and the companies handle it through specialized service models. For Beam Global, as we mentioned, the solar canopy generates the power right on site.
So it's totally self-sufficient.
Entirely. But for Spark Charge, they operate a mobile delivery network called Currently. They essentially run a fleet of vans equipped with even larger energy storage systems.
Okay.
These vans drive regular routes, pulling up to the stationary roadie units to refill them right there on site. They've effectively created a physical, road-based extension of the electrical grid.
Moving the energy to the chargers rather than forcing the chargers to connect to the grid.
Exactly.
So the physical hardware is finally untethered from the ground. But if we look at the software side of the equation, a totally different problem emerges.
It does.
Because it doesn't matter how flexible your physical battery is if the software running it completely traps you.
Yeah.
You might not be chained to the electrical grid, but you can absolutely be chained to a software vendor.
That is a critical distinction. The physical infrastructure, the metal, the plugs, the battery cells, is only half of the system.
Right.
The business management software is where the operational control truly lies. And in the EV charging industry right now, there is a massive tension playing out between closed ecosystems and open platforms.
We can see this clearly in how the sources compare two major players, ChargePoint and EV Connect. ChargePoint operates as a vertically integrated closed ecosystem.
Right.
They bundle their hardware, their software, and their network management together into one package. EV Connect operates very differently. They're a software-first, hardware-agnostic platform.
And site hosts, the business owners actually buying these chargers, are starting to push back against the closed systems because of unpredictable long-term costs.
Yeah. The big catalyst mentioned in our research is that ChargePoint instituted new possession fees taking effect in 2026, ranging from 25 to 49 cents every single time someone plugs in.
And you have to look at how that scales. If you're a site host managing, say, an apartment complex with 50 chargers and residents are plugging in every single evening, those possession fees accumulate drastically over a year.
Yeah, that adds up fast.
The problem with a closed ecosystem is that if you don't like those new fees or if the customer service declines, you are largely stuck. Because the hardware and the software are proprietary and inseparable, leaving that network traditionally meant having to rip your expensive physical chargers out of the ground and replace them with completely new machines.
Which is an incredibly punitive barrier to exit.
Absolutely.
But I hear you on the costs and the vendor lock-in, but I want to look at this from the user's perspective for a second. Isn't a closed, tightly controlled ecosystem usually better for the end-user experience?
How do you... Well, think about Apple. An iPhone works so seamlessly with a Mac and an Apple Watch specifically because Apple tightly controls every aspect of both the hardware and the software. If it offers that kind of plug-and-play simplicity on day one, why are site hosts so desperate to break out of it?
That makes intuitive sense, and on day one of a deployment, a closed system often does feel much easier to manage.
Right.
But the key difference is the life cycle of the product. EV charging infrastructure is not a smartphone that you replace every 2 years.
Yeah.
These are massive capital investments meant to sit in the parking lot for a decade or more. And the underlying technology, how fast cars can accept a charge, the battery architectures, how the chargers integrate with local energy storage, it's evolving at a blistering pace.
So the hardware ages out faster than the business model can support.
Exactly. Site hosts are terrified of being stuck with obsolete hardware that they cannot upgrade independently of their software provider's specific roadmap.
Yeah. If a new, incredibly fast charger hits the market from a different manufacturer, they want the freedom to install it without having to migrate their entire software backend or force their users to download a brand new app.
And that desire for freedom is where a process called re-networking comes in. The technical articles dive into a standard called OCPP, which stands for the Open Charge Point Protocol.
Right.
Think of it as a universal translator for EV chargers. If your physical hardware speaks this open language, you can execute a network migration without touching the physical metal and plastic.
The mechanism behind it is actually quite simple from the host's perspective. It involves something called a WebSocket URL.
Which sounds a little intimidating. How does that actually work in practice?
You can think of a WebSocket URL as the charger's digital mailing address for its data.
Okay.
If you're a site host and you're unhappy with your current software provider, you don't need to buy a new machine. You just log into the charger's backend interface, delete the old digital mailing address, and type in the new WebSocket URL for a provider like EV Connect.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that, suddenly, all the data, the payment processing, and the remote diagnostics are routing to the new company.
It completely eliminates the rip and replace nightmare. You aren't ripping up concrete just to change your software vendor.
Exactly.
And it forces those software providers to constantly compete on the quality of their service and their pricing rather than relying on hardware lock-in to hold their customers hostage.
Precisely. And when you combine this open software flexibility with the off-grid hardware we talked about earlier, you get a model that Spark Charge calls CapEx, or charging as a service.
Right.
It allows for zero CapEx deployment. A business doesn't buy the hardware or the software outright. They simply pay a rate for the energy delivered to their site.
The sources point out how crucial this is for industries outside of just transportation, too. Data centers, for example, are absolutely desperate for power right now due to the massive boom in AI processing.
Oh, absolutely.
The materials note that by using these modular off-grid systems, a data center can get supplemental power running in 120 days. Compare that to waiting up to 5 years for a major high-voltage grid connection from a utility. The speed of deployment is just night and day.
It's a brilliant solution for normal logistical challenges. But we have to ask, how resilient is this dynamic, untethered paradigm when it's subjected to the ultimate stress test?
Right.
It's one thing to supply power to a data center or a car share fleet on a normal Tuesday. It's an entirely different challenge to apply this flexibility to a life or death scenario like a mass natural disaster.
Which brings us to the most intense piece of research in our stack today. There's this fascinating academic paper published on RT that specifically models the use of these mobile charging trucks, or MCTs, during a mass hurricane evacuation.
Yeah, this study was incredible.
They used real-world traffic and geographic data modeled on a simulated Hurricane Milton hitting Hillsborough County, Florida.
Evacuations are inherently chaotic, but they are the absolute ultimate nightmare for EV infrastructure.
Because of the limited range.
Partly, yeah. An electric vehicle already has inherent vulnerabilities compared to a gas car, shorter ranges, and they rely on a much sparser network of fixed charging stations. But during a summer hurricane evacuation, you also have extreme heat.
Right.
The paper notes that at 95 degrees Fahrenheit, EVs actually lose about 8.5% of their driving range.
Wait, why is the heat specifically draining the battery so fast? Is it just everyone blasting the air conditioning?
The air conditioning is a factor, sure, but the bigger issue is the vehicle's thermal management system. Lithium-ion batteries degrade and can become really dangerous if they get too hot.
Oh, I see.
So the car actively runs cooling systems to keep the battery pack at a safe temperature. That active cooling drains the very energy you desperately need to drive away from the storm.
So picture the scenario. You have hundreds of thousands of people fleeing inland. Their battery range is draining faster than normal because of the heat. And because the infrastructure is sparse, they're all converging on the exact same fixed charging stations along the main evacuation routes.
Right, it creates a bottleneck.
The huge one. You end up with massive hours-long queues. And being stuck in a parking lot while a Category 4 hurricane is approaching is literal physical risk exposure.
Exactly.
To solve this, the paper proposes a highly complex AI framework to manage those mobile charging trucks we discussed earlier, deploying them as dynamic backup. They call the framework ARMD, which stands for Adaptive Risk-Aware MCT Deployment.
Right. And the researchers approached this by breaking the chaos down into two distinct operational challenges. The first challenge is allocation, figuring out exactly which fixed charging stations need the mobile backup trucks the most.
Oh, wait.
To solve this, they modeled the system using something called a decentralized POMDP. That stands for Partially Observable Markov Decision Process.
Okay, that is a dense academic term. What does a partially observable Markov decision process actually mean in plain English for the trucks on the ground?
Fair question. It essentially means they treat each mobile charging truck as an independent, intelligent agent. In a major disaster, centralized communication networks like cell towers, internet infrastructure often fail.
Right, you lose connection.
Exactly. You cannot rely on a single omniscient command center seeing the entire map perfectly and barking orders. So the system is partially observable. Each truck only sees the local traffic and queue conditions immediately around it.
Got it.
But using multi-agent reinforcement learning, these independent trucks are trained to anticipate each other's actions and work toward a common goal without needing to talk to a central boss constantly.
It is almost like a decentralized swarm of battery medics. They know their overall mission, they assess their immediate surroundings, and they deploy themselves where the bleeding is worst.
That is exactly how it functions. But once a truck knows which station needs help, it faces the second challenge, routing.
Because it still has to get there.
Right. How does a heavy truck actually get to that station through apocalyptic evacuation traffic? To solve this, the researchers developed a spatiotemporal travel time prediction model, or STPM.
And how's that differ from just, using standard GPS navigation on your phone?
Standard GPS tells you where the traffic is right now. The STPM doesn't just look at current congestion, it acts as a predictive engine.
Oh, predictive.
Yeah, it analyzes spatial data, the physical layout of the roads, and temporal data, how traffic patterns shift over time, to predict how the congestion will evolve over the next hour.
Wow.
It uses what they call rolling horizon updates to constantly recalculate and reroute the mobile trucks around traffic jams that haven't even fully formed yet.
But honestly, Looking at this from a purely practical standpoint,
Hmm.
why do we need a complex predictive AI just to dispatch some battery trucks?
What do you mean?
If a charging station on the highway has a 2-mile line of cars waiting for power, just dispatch the mobile truck there immediately. Why overcomplicate it with spatiotemporal predictions and rolling horizons?
It is a very logical question to ask, and it's exactly why the researchers tested that exact approach. They called it the greedy baseline method, essentially. Just react to the biggest, most immediate cue on the map.
Yeah, makes sense.
And the simulation showed that the greedy method failed catastrophically in the late stages of the evacuation.
Why did it fail? It seems like common sense to help the biggest line first.
Because an evacuation is not a static event. It is a moving wave of traffic pushing away from the coast. If you just chase the current biggest queue, you're reacting to the past.
Ah, I see.
By the time a heavy mobile charging truck navigates through the gridlock to reach that station, the wave of evacuees might have already moved further inland, or even worse, the truck itself gets trapped in the exact traffic it was trying to alleviate.
Oh, wow.
Reacting to the present means you are always arriving too late. The AI framework succeeds because it predicts where the bottlenecks will be an hour from now, and it routes the trucks proactively, ensuring they're in position before the gridlock traps them.
It's literally playing chess with hurricane traffic. And the results they published in the paper are incredibly validating. When they tested this AI swarm against scenarios where EV charging demand unexpectedly spiked, the ARMD framework reduced the average risk exposure of the evacuees by up to 71.1% compared to having no mobile trucks at all.
That's a massive reduction in risk.
Huge. And even in severe disaster scenarios, where the grid failed and 15 to 45% of the fixed charging stations went completely offline, or where flooded roads physically fragmented the map into disconnected zones, the AI still managed to cut risk exposure by 39.3 to 60.5%.
And one of the most fascinating operational details they discovered during the simulation was regarding the optimal fleet size. In their modeling of Hillsborough County, they found that a fleet of exactly 7 mobile charging trucks was the sweet spot.
Just 7.
Just 7. Adding more trucks beyond that yielded diminishing returns and just added to road congestion.
That is a crucial point. It proves that you don't need a massive, endless supply of mobile batteries to save a city. You just need a small, highly targeted fleet deployed with absolute intelligence.
Right.
So let's step back and connect all the dots we've covered today for you listening. We started off picturing that traditional gas station, cemented into the ground, rigid, and incredibly slow to adapt to new technology.
The old way of doing things.
Yeah. But everything we've explored today is a total rebellion against that outdated model. We have 1,600-pound spark charge batteries that can bypass the utility grid and drop into a parking lot in 48 hours. We have solar-powered beam systems running car share fleets with zero construction.
And we have site hosts breaking free from vendor lock-in using open-source WebSocket URLs.
Exactly. And we have predictive AI dispatching decentralized swarms of mobile power into hurricane zones.
The overarching narrative here is that energy itself is transitioning. It's no longer just a static utility that you have to travel to and wait in line for. It's becoming a highly intelligent, fluid resource that can actively travel to you, scaling up and adapting to exactly what a community needs right when they need it most. It completely redefines how we should be thinking about local infrastructure and community resilience.
It really does. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We've talked about how the grid is untethering. If the electric vehicles we drive are essentially just giant batteries on wheels, and these mobile chargers are just bigger batteries on wheels, and the software networks running all of them are becoming fully open and interoperable.
Yeah.
I mean, how far away are we from a future where the entire concept of a designated charging station disappears completely? Could we soon see a decentralized, peer-to-peer network where everyday cars autonomously trade, buy, and sell power to each other while simply driving down the highway?
If the hardware is untethered and the software is open, the possibilities are entirely limitless.
They really are. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.